How's everybody doing today? So here I am in Indianapolis, Indiana, and I'm here to talk about the case of Sylvia Likens. It is graphic, it is horrific. I'm going to give you a lot of terrible details of what happened to this young, innocent 16-year-old girl right across in this empty lot where the house used to stand, a house of absolute horrors, right across the street from me. And then we're going to go into town further, find the memorial to her, and then ultimately go to her grave, which is about 30 minutes from here. It was 1965. Sylvia Likens was 16 years old. She had a younger sister named Jenny, who walked with a bit of a limp after suffering from a bout of childhood polio. She had an older sister, two younger brothers, whose parents were carnival workers, so they had to travel and leave home. The older sister was married, so that was not a problem leaving her. The two younger boys went and stayed with Sylvia's grandparents, but he needed a place for the two girls, Sylvia and Jenny. Sylvia had made a friend at school named Baniszewski. And Sylvia's father talked to Gertrude Baniszewski, and I'm gonna start calling her something else probably because she's the most awful woman I've ever heard of. Gertrude Baniszewski. Call her the witch, maybe. I was thinking when I was driving, I was like, I don't even want to call her by her name. He thought Gertrude said, I'll take care of them for $20 a week. And in 1965, that was a lot of money. Take care of the two girls. As they went off to work the carnival circuit. They sold at concession stands. So that's what happened. And around June of 1965, he left. I believe now there's other reports that Sylvia's mother was in jail for shoplifting, so the father couldn't take care of. That's why the father had to leave them with someone else. I'm not sure exactly. There's a lot of different parts to the story, and there's so many different versions. So I'm going to try to give you both. But the general story is Sylvia and her sister were left here at this house, where the house used to stand, with Gertrude and her 7 children by 3 different fathers. Gertrude did not have a lot of money. The witch did not have a lot of money. And one time the father, Sylvia's father, missed one of the payments of the $20 a week. So, and it came the next day, but this began some of the most brutal and violent torture, and it was all taken out on Sylvia. I think probably because Sylvia was, young, she was pretty, she was smart. Everything Gertrude probably never was and wasn't. It was right here. I'm going to match up where the house used to be. And one of the neighborhood boys who partook in the crimes, his house still stands. I'm going to show you that too. For the first 2 weeks at the Baniszewskis, Sylvia and her sister were treated kindly enough. But Gertrude's oldest daughter seemed to always butt heads with Sylvia. Then the payment came in late. Gertrude said, I took care of you 2 bitches for 2 weeks for nothing. And then she grabbed Sylvia by the arm, dragged her into her room, and closed the door. Jenny sat outside the door and listened as her sister screamed. The money arrived the following day, but the torture had just begun. Gertrude soon began to abuse both Sylvia and Jenny in broad daylight. Though a frail woman, Gertrude used a heavy paddle and thick leather belt from one of her husbands who had been a cop. When she was too exhausted or too weak to discipline the girls herself, Paula stepped in to take her place. Soon, however, it was only Sylvia who became the focus of the abuse. Gertrude eventually demanded that Jenny join in, unless she wanted to take her sister's place as the brunt of the abuse. Gertrude, or the witch, accused Sylvia of stealing from her and burned Sylvia's fingertips. She took her to a church function and force-fed her hot dogs until she was sick. Then, as punishment for throwing up good food, she forced her to eat her own vomit. She encouraged her children to partake in the abuse of Sylvia and her sister. The Baniszewski kids practiced karate on Sylvia, slammed her into walls and onto the floor. They used her skin as an ashtray, threw her downstairs and cut open her skin and rubbed salt into her wounds. After this, she would often be cleansed, quote unquote, in a scalding hot bath. The story is about to get a lot worse. Gertrude gave sermons on the evils of promiscuity while Paula stomped on Sylvia's vagina. Paula, who herself was pregnant, accused Sylvia of being with child and mutilated the girl's genitals. Gertrude's 12-year-old son, John Jr., delighted in forcing the girl to lick his youngest sibling's soiled diapers clean. Sylvia was forced to strip naked and shove an empty Coca-Cola bottle into her vagina while the Baniszewski children watched. Sylvia was so beaten that she was unable to use the bathroom voluntarily. When she wet her mattress, Gertrude decided that the girl was no longer fit to live with the rest of her children, and she was then locked in the basement without food or access to the bathroom. Gertrude spread every story she could imagine to get the local kids to join in on the beatings. She told her daughter that Sylvia had called her a whore and got her daughter's friends to come over and beat her up for it. Gertrude, the witch, told her own children that Sylvia was a prostitute. Then she had Ricky Hobbs, a neighborhood boy, and her 11-year-old daughter Marie carve the words, "I'm a prostitute and proud of it," into her abdomen with a heated needle. At one point, Sylvia's oldest sister, Diana, did attempt to see the girls under Gertrude's care, but was turned away at the door. Jenny later reported how Diana had snuck food into the basement in which Sylvia was hidden. A neighbor had also reported the incidents to a public health nurse who, upon entering the home and not seeing Sylvia for she was locked in the basement, concluded that nothing was wrong. Baniszewski had also managed to convince the nurse that she had kicked the Likens girls out. Other next-door neighbors allegedly were aware of how Sylvia was abused. They had seen Paula strike the girl in the Baniszewski home on 2 separate occasions, but claimed not to report the abuse because they feared for their own lives. Jenny was threatened, bullied, and beaten by the Baniszewskis and neighborhood girls alike should she go to the authorities. The abuse of Sylvia continued unhindered, in fact, aided by all of those around her. The house was eventually demolished, but it wasn't demolished until it sat vacant for years. I believe it was like around 2010. And there's videos of people that went in the house and they went in through the basement. And you can see these houses in the background in their video. I'm gonna maybe use a short couple of clips in their video. Hope that's okay with them. And you can check out their video. But you can see this house in the background and this building, which is now a church. And that parking lot where the house used to be is the parking lot for the church. So out some of the windows, you can see that building. I just like matching things up. And you can see that building right there with different angles. Hard to get across this street. Right there. But yes, that's a church now, right across the street from where Sylvia Likens was tortured, mutilated, and ultimately murdered. "I'm going to die," Sylvia told her sister 3 days before she eventually did. "I can tell." This is some video footage of the basement that the other YouTube channel took. Gertrude could tell too, and so she forced Sylvia to write a note in which she told her parents that she'd run away. Sylvia was also forced to write that she met up with a group of boys and given them sexual favors, and afterwards, they'd beaten her and mutilated her body. Shortly after this, Sylvia overheard Gertrude, the witch, tell her children that she was going to take Sylvia to a forest and leave her there to die. A desperate Sylvia attempted one final escape. She managed to get out the front door before Gertrude caught her. Sylvia was so weak from her injuries she could not have possibly gotten too far. With the assistance of a neighbor boy named Coy Hubbard, Gertrude beat Sylvia with a curtain rod until she fell unconscious. Then, when she came back to, she stomped on her head. Sylvia was dead by October 26, 1965 from a brain hemorrhage, shock, and malnutrition. After 3 months of torture and starvation, she could no longer form intelligible words and could barely move her limbs. When the police came, Gertrude stuck with her cover story. Sylvia had been out with the boys in the woods. She told them, and they'd beaten her to death and carved, "I'm a prostitute and proud of it," into her body. Jenny, though, took her chance. As soon as she could get close enough to a police officer, she whispered, "Get me out of here, and I'll tell you everything." And now I'm going to go find the memorial for her, which is in a park, somewhere near here. I'm not sure exactly where. I'm going to go find it now, and you're going to come along with me.
The police arrested Gertrude, Paula, Stephanie, and John Baniszewski, Richard Hobbs, and Coy Hubbard for murder. Neighborhood participants were also arrested for, quote-unquote, injury to person. These minors would blame Gertrude for being pressured to partake in the slaughter of Sylvia Likens. Gertrude herself pleaded not guilty by reason of insanity. She's not responsible, her defense told the court, because she's not all here. There were several more children involved who proved just too young to be charged. Ultimately, though, on May 19, 1966, Gertrude Baniszewski was convicted of first-degree murder and sentenced to life imprisonment. She was spared the death penalty despite her own lawyer admitting that, in my opinion, she ought to go to the electric chair. Paula Baniszewski, who had given birth to a daughter during the trial, was convicted of second-degree murder and was also sentenced to life imprisonment. Richard Hobbs, Coy Hubbard, and John Baniszewski Jr. were all convicted of manslaughter and given 2 to 21 years prison sentences based on the fact that they were minors. The 3 boys were all paroled just 2 years later in 1968.
It reads, the Sylvia Likens Memorial. I see a light, hope. I feel a breeze, strength. I hear a song, relief. Let them through, for they are the welcome ones. Ivan Rogers, Indianapolis Police Department, April 25th, 2001. This memorial is in memory of a young child who died a tragic death. As a result, laws changed and awareness increased. This is a commitment to our children, that the Indianapolis Police Department is working to make this a safe city for all children. It's gonna stay, huh? And now we're going to drive about 30 minutes northwest to Sylvia Likens' final resting place, which is in Lebanon, Indiana. Like I said, that's a memorial to her, and this is her gravesite we're going to now.
Gertrude spent 20 years behind bars. There was no question about her guilt. The autopsy backed up everything Jenny had told the police. Sylvia Likens died slowly and painfully over several months. In 1971, both Gertrude and Paula were retried to the result that Gertrude was again found guilty. Paula pled guilty to a lesser charge of voluntary manslaughter and was sentenced to 2 to 21 years. She once even managed to escape despite being recaptured. After about 8 years behind bars, Paula was released and she moved to Iowa, where she changed her name and became a teacher's aide. And when they found out she falsified information, she was eventually fired. Gertrude was granted parole on good behavior on December 4th, 1985. Jenny and a whole crowd of people picketed outside the prison to protest her release, but it was no use. Gertrude Baniszewski was set free. The only relief Jenny received came 5 years after Gertrude's release, when the murderess died of cancer. "Some good news," Jenny wrote to her mother with a copy of the woman's obituary. "Damn old Gertrude died. Ha ha ha. I am happy about that."
So driving northwest from Indianapolis, finally made it here to Oak Hill Cemetery in Lebanon, Indiana. And it's a long time coming for me to come out to Sylvia Likens' grave. That's the entrance right behind me. It's coming right straight, and I'm gonna try to find Sylvia's grave. It should be right around here from what I know. Let's take a look. If you're in Lebanon, Indiana, and you want to come out and see Sylvia Likens' grave, just come right in the front entrance of Oak Hill Cemetery and see those trees. That's straight ahead through the front entrance. You see my car kind of in the background part behind it. And then walk one road over. There's another road. And just keep going straight ahead. And look for that monument. Sylvia's right here, kind of in the middle. And that concludes my story about Sylvia Likens. May she rest in peace. And may the perpetrators, those that are alive, Hope they think about her every day. And the ones that are no longer alive, Sylvia Likens, rest in peace. And peace and love to all of you. Peace.